Right. Yeah, so Fisherton. Clearly that's not Fisherton. It aims at Fisherton. It's John Constable's picture of 1831. 2 years earlier, he set his easel in the same place, turned his back on the cathedral, and painted Fisherton. So there's the Fisherton Mill, St Clement's Church, and the chimney of the rectory. So there are advantages to having a famous neighbour, and you might get painted. This is the parish boundary with the modern contours with 10-metre intervals and modern water courses. Both are heavily humanly modified. You see where the railway and the roads are council too. And the water channels especially are modified. But you can see the parish is largely flat land near the two rivers. There's a ridge running down here. The ridge continues to rise about 3 kilometres further up there. It reaches 140 metres, which is sort of plateau level. I've shown the modern roads, which could well be 1,000 years old, could be 2,000 years old or more. And the road to Wilton and further west, Winchester, Clarendon, wherever, and up to Devizes meandering across the plain. The Roman road, the parish boundary totally ignores the Roman road. Otherwise, the parish boundary is bounded on 3 sides by the river. The solid geology is chalk. Most of the parish is mapped as superficial, and the superficial isn't well understood. I think there have been not enough holes to be in the area, and most of it's in the housing now, which makes it difficult to work out from aerial photography. Archaeology could probably add more to that. There's every bit of prehistoric you want. There's lower, middle and upper Paleolithic. Phil's recently published about the upper Paleolithic. They're all on terraces. And then there's for more recent archaeology, there's probably a bit of background Mesolithic. I've had a few bladelets from around there's an early Neolithic pit, a middle Neolithic pit. The Bronze Age rapier was found in the parish. And then in the Iron Age, there are about 70 pits around here. There were some Middle Iron Age burials, which are quite unusual. An Iron Age Roman British enclaves, 2 very short periods of Roman British occupation. I think the Saxon evidence is documentary. Partly St Clement's is a Viking foundation, and it's in Domesday as well. So, just the things I want to point out from the Domesday entrance. It's 3 hides then, which equates to about 350 acres. Also, you've got 40 acres of pasture, 48 acres of meadow, and 40 acres of pasture. And in 1700, you've got 80 acres of water meadow. So I would guess they're pretty well the same areas. And I mean, actually, this suggested reconstruction of the arable farming system in Domesday is pretty well just taken from 1700. If you look at the village itself, you probably still got a ford at Domesday over the Avon. You've got the village green, which survived until the London railway line, the through line, in 1856. Brunel Station actually fronted on to that road. Brunel Station was at terminus. So there's St Clement's and the mill down by the river. I've shown the manor here. If anybody knows Fisherton, they'll know the old manor hospital is out on the Wilton Road. Well, the Victoria County history says that there is presumably evidence that there was a manor there. They don't give any evidence, and I don't know of any evidence. However, one of the railway maps of 1846 refers to a Rick Barton here, and Rick Barton is usually taken as being a manorial site and very close to the manor, or sorry, a demesne close to the manor. So I've shown the manor as being here, and all the village basically is on this little spur off the main through road. It's a very similar layout to Laverstock, where again you've got a small village green, a cul-de-sac leading down to the river, and the church located on that cul-de-sac, and possibly similar to St Martin's as well, which is a cul-de-sac up the main road. Yes, sorry. St Clement's is apparently invariably a Viking foundation or dedication. So I'm assuming that dates to Canute or one of his sons, 1040 to 1060. Yeah, and the parish is clearly, it's clearly carved out of the parish Froston St Peter to the west. They've refused to surrender this little bit of land here, which is now has a signpost saying that there were with events there. And the parish also follows what is described as the Old River. This larger watercourse is actually leading to the Bishop's Mill here. So the Bishop's Mill was already established. If we skip to 1300, Salisbury's been there in existence for about 80 years, and there are many changes. There's probably pretty definitely one bridge, possibly two. There are 10 customary tenants in 1303, which is up from the Domesday total. There are 6 shops in 1286, and the friary as well. St Clement's Church has been rebuilt in stone by one of the Aushers. I should say Fisherton Anger is named after the occupation of many of the inhabitants who were fishers. And the Anger is a corruption of Ausher, the 12th, 13th century lords of the manor. It was Ausher, Auger, Anger, and now Anger. By 1300, the value of the manor has doubled to nearly to £5.5, largely due to the mill, which is contributing much more. So 10 customary tenants over. So the friary was established in 1282 by Edward I. There had been 4 tenements on what became the precinct and various meadows. So I think the fact that you've got 4 tenements in this eastern end of Fisherton Street shows how the village has expanded. It's already focusing on Salisbury. We've been talking about water channels, and I think that the boundary of the precinct is formed by a water channel, which defines it, possibly defends it. It certainly acts as a flood relief. It's just upstream from the medieval bridge. Water would easily back up from there under flooding. I think a lot of the water channels around Salisbury are trying to divert water away from the city. You can make a case for the channel supplying Highland Mill doubling as a flood defence for the city, I think. Edward I granted the land. There was a further 1.5 acres given by Henry Fitzarishire in 1295. There were about 20 gardens. Well, at the surrender there were 20 gardens. Hedging was delivered, which possibly totaled about kilometres worth of hedging. There seems to be a wall, a gatehouse, and certainly later various other buildings. There was an anchor's garden at the surrender, and it was mentioned a couple of times in the early 15th century. So I think by then, Fisherton is already becoming a suburb. Presumably some of the people leaving Old Sarum are actually moving into Fisherton rather than into the new city. If we look just after the surrender of the friary, we don't know what happened in Fisherton, how the Black Death affected Fisherton at all, but presumably the village had continued to expand. Immediately after the surrender of the friary, there were two inns in the former precinct. It seems they were there while the friary was still open. The friary needed the income. There was probably the George, there was the George, I think, probably the Lamb, and I would suspect at least one other pub in the village. The new jail had been built by 1560s to 1570s. It was on land that had to be bought. There had been a jail in Fisherton from 1421, but we don't know where that was. The gatehouse, after the surrender, was occupied by John Powell, and coincidentally one of his brothers lived in King's House here. The second brother lived in Hemsby, up further up in the close. If we skip on another 200 years, this is still pretty slightly stylised drawing of the village. Fisherton Bridge here, Fisherton Street, and on towards the road. Doesn't show Devizes Road for some unknown reason. It does show, basically, that you've got larger buildings at the east end of Fisherton Street, and you've still got a small number in what was the original core of the village. I've estimated the population from the parish registers. thank you to the Family History Society for providing the data to allow us to do that. I'd say the average of baptisms was over 10 years and multiplied them by 30. I can't remember where I read that as an estimate of the population. It doesn't 100% work. There are a couple of other indications of what the population could have been, but certainly by 1800, my estimate gives 870 or 900, and there were actually 865, including inhabitants in the infirmary and the jail. So the estimate isn't 100%, but so this drop, if you look at that drop there, it's a drop in population suggesting 25%. And we do know in 1707, poverty was so great in Fisherton and other parishes in the branch and Dole 100 that the quarter sessions allotted parishes of other hundreds to contribute money. In 15 parishes, as far away as Lugashall and Durrington, had to contribute. So I think that population is reasonable. They finally admitted in 1723 that smallpox had arrived. And actually from 1723 for the next 80 years, until Jenner's vaccinations were distributed for free, for virtually every year, more people died, more people were buried than were baptised. So in that climb in population, assuming that is real, and I think it probably is, because both burials and baptisms increase, it must mean there are people moving into the village, maybe displaced by enclosures in surrounding villages. This is based on Nash's map, which I put down as 1715. I have to change this because Phil says 16. It shows the layout of the village quite well. As Phil said, I think it is an accurate map. It's showing just terraces, which obviously isn't so. And actually Phil's suggestion that these are the medieval buildings, one is a really interesting one. He does show the property divisions at the back though. So I think it's a good map. Most of the positions of inns and people and timber yards and so on, I don't have time to go into how I decided that. I've taken it from the rates that were collected, the rates that were collected in 1712, 1713. And you can see there are an awful lot of pubs, or inns. In 1685, Fisherton's inns had 82 beds and stabling for 123 horses. That's more beds than Wilton, fewer stables. I think it's something like the sixth biggest provider of beds and stabling in the county. There are all these comments that Fisherton was dissolute, a lot of drinking going on there because it's outside the city. I don't think that's necessarily true. If you look at the inventories of the inns, the list of contents of the kitchen in the Sun, the list runs to over 60 lines, and the equipment in the kitchen is worth over £21. There were three. Now, there was a large parlour and a small parlour downstairs. One had 2 oval tables and 12 chairs. The little parlour had 1 oval table and 12 chairs. The accommodation provided, the large parlour had 13 prints on the wall. There was a cloth screen and bell. There were various parlours, dining rooms, shuffleboard rooms in some of the inns. Some of the smaller inns had brew houses, but brew houses seem to be absent in the larger inns, and some of them definitely bought their own beer in. Chambers in the inns varied in size, but for the son, the Great Chamber, which is the largest, it had 2 bedsteads, 2 feather bolsters, pillows, blankets, quilts. That had a square and an oval table. It had 10 chairs. There were rods and curtains on the windows. There were 5 prints on the walls. And unusually, there was also a looking glass. So you're not talking about flop houses. Some of the inns are rivaling inns in the middle of Salisbury. I think there is a distinction to be drawn between a hotel and a pub or an ale house. And I think these are hotels at the east end of the road, which have all got stabling at the back. I think these 3 are locals, servant to the villagers. They're paying a quarter the rates than these other inns. Another one, there's scant evidence of prostitution in the village. Fisherton to Salisbury is often compared to Southwark to London. And there's this implication there should be the equivalent of the Winchester geese, prostitutes that the Bishop of Winchester made money out of, basically. But if you look at I've not looked at court records, but again from the parish records, there were 3 or 4 base-born children born a decade between 1660 and 1689. But I mean, that's after the Restoration. You've got Charles II debauching in London. I don't think that's particularly spectacular. Having said that, there was a court order of 1674 closing all the ale houses in Fisherton, and they were closed for about 3-4 months. Decades after 1840 show there are some base-born children, but mostly I've written when soldiers were manoeuvring in the vicinity. So, I mean, this thing about the immorality, obviously if someone is persistently immoral, they're maybe not going to have the children baptised, or they might be dealing with it in another way. I haven't found any evidence for it, I'll just say that. The gallows were in existence by then. I think 1570, some had been martyred between Salisbury and Wilton in the fields. Speed on his 1611 map, I think, shows a spike there, which is assumed to be the gallows. 2 brick kilns on either side of Wilton Road. King's House, again, is the earliest brick building in Salisbury, 1600. I think by 1625, brick was the go-to building material. Fisherton had a good source of clay. Personally, I think that Fisherton supplied most of the bricks in Salisbury, and obviously brick totally transformed its townscape. So yeah, I think the bricks are quite interesting. And yeah, you got the bowling green. I can't remember if I mentioned the shuffleboard rooms in the hotels. I mean, they're references to people playing or just enjoying themselves. Yeah, there was a fulling mill for the city. Look at what people were doing for occupation. I mean, a third I'd put down as clothing. A good quarter of those are actually weavers or cloth workers. But no weavers seem to leave wills. One cloth worker did, and he left £200 and some pounds. So I suspect you've got a very hierarchical organisation. I think weaving for Fisherton people, it was better than not having a job. I don't think it was well paid, but it was better than not working. A couple of the tailors left decent amounts of money as well. Can't say anything about the labourers, but they're a quarter of the population. Inholders, a maltster or two, an ostler, again about a tenth of the population. Inholders from their wills were leaving, well, 11 inholders left an average of £75. By contrast, the yeomen, 7 left between 100 and 200 pounds. One left £1,100. There was a gardener who left 10. I'll come to gardening in a minute. The construction, I say, it is this new industry of building in brick. Very little food represented there. I mean food retail, selling food. Basically, it's only one baker. The other people only did it for a couple of years. So I think the fact that a baker can survive shows the importance of bread in the diet for people of Fisherton. And then miscellaneous, sort of traditional occupations, maybe more blacksmiths than you'd expect, and one's an edge tool maker, so potentially a cutler, and cutlery is an important industry in Salisbury. The pipe makers are unusual, and it seems to be only in this very short period of 7 years when there were any pipe makers. I don't think Europe mentions any of the time. It's horrible that. And then the 2 barbers, whether they were surgeon barbers or what, I don't know. One of them had been worked in silk, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, so there's how the land was used. We get 4 descriptions of the fields between the 17th and 19th century. One of them makes it clear that the arable fields were still divided into furlongs, and the furlongs were divided into strips, and the strips had separate owners. It was a medieval arable system. But there's about 80 acres of water meadow, which they started to introduce about 1660. And gardeners get mentioned. tentatively put the gardens down here. I think this is market gardening, supplying Salisbury with whatever they would be growing. So there are innovations in agriculture. If you look at the later population, I mean that's sort of standard Victorian increase in population. And I mean, while this is going on, St Clement's Church is taken down, replaced by St Paul's. You also get the infirmary and asylum, the gasworks, railway stations, malting houses, a lot of domestic houses built in the parish. And we also have the shortest standing gauge railway in the country, linking this station and the Salisbury market. So that's the parish now. There's no agricultural land at all. This is arable, just beyond the parish. That's paddocks, allotments, playing areas, parking. Queen Lizzie Gardens, Elizabeth Gardens, but that's built up. Yeah, so that's the parish now. And then that's where we started with constables, St Diseasel. Like I say, that Queen Elizabeth Gardens, this land had probably been owned by St Nicholas Hospital originally, or early in the history of the village. Probably became market gardening after that, and then a nursery, and finally a park, recreation area. And that's it.